Hare Krishna, Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 3, Text 36. Arjuna Uvacha Adha Kena Prayuktoyam Papam Charadi Purushaha Anichanna Bivarshneya Baladiva Niyojitaha. Meaning, a living entity, as part and parcel of the Supreme, is originally spiritual, pure, and free from all material contaminations. Therefore, by nature, he is not subject to the sins of the material world. But when he is in contact with the material nature, he acts in many sinful ways without hesitation, and sometimes even against his will. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he is still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the supersoul within, but are due to another cause. Text 37. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Kamayesha Krodhayesha Rajoguna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyena Miha Vairinam. Meaning, when a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust, as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. A wrath is transformed into illusion. An illusion continues a material existence. Therefore, lust is the highest enemy of the living entity, and it is lust only which induces a pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If therefore the mode of passion, instead of being degraded into the mode of ignorance, is elevated to the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath by the spiritual attachment. The origin of everything is supreme, the Brahman. Therefore, the origin of lust is also in the Supreme. If lust is transformed into love for the Supreme, or transformed into Krishna consciousness, or in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Text 38. Dhumena vriyate vahnir yadhadarsho malena cha yadholbhena vrito garbhas tadhate nedamavritam. Meaning, there are 3 degrees of covering of the living entity by which his pure consciousness is obscured. This covering is but lust under different manifestations like smoke in the fire, dust on the mirror, and the womb about the embryo. When lust is compared to smoke, it is understood that the fire of the living spark can be little perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits its Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by the smoke. Although the fire is necessary where there is smoke, this stage is liking the beginning of the Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refers to cleansing process of the mirror of the mind. The best process is to chant the holy names of the Lord. The embryo covered by the womb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position, for the child in the womb is so helpless that he cannot even move. By careful handling of the smoke in the fire, fire can be made to blaze. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy, lust, by the cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. Text 39. Avritam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. Meaning, it is said in the Manusmriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of the sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maitunya Agara, or the shackles of the sex life. In ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within the bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by the sex life. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. Text 40. Indriyani mano buddhir asyadhishthanamuchyate etervimohayatyesha jnanamavritya dehinam. Meaning, mind is the center of all activities of the senses, and thus, when we hear about these objects, the mind generally becomes a reservoir of all ideas of the sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter, and thus with the mind and the senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna.